We're going to use the trig ratios to find the angle measures. And remember, this is the button where we find the angle measures because it's the inverse, working backwards. Okay, so I'm actually going to skip these because these are not really like the class. And then we'll go back to these. I'll be able to relate those questions to those. So it says, find the measure of the indicated angle to the nearest degree. Okay, so that means if I get an answer 55.5876, something like that, this would round to 51 degrees. That's the nearest degree. Okay, so question number 7 states, what angle? What's the measure of the angle? So I've got to label my sides. That's the hypotenuse, opposite. So notice here I have hypotenuse and opposite. So if you have your yellow card, oh, there's one somebody left behind. I'm just going to jot those down. Hopefully you have them. Sine is opposite hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent hypotenuse. And tangent is opposite over adjacent. Okay. So there's our trig functions, and it looks like I'm going to use sine because I have opposite hypotenuse. So sine of an angle is opposite hypotenuse, and I have 51 as the opposite and 55 as the hypotenuse. Okay, so if I take the inverse sine to both sides, there's a lot to write down here, so don't get too lost in the notation. But if I take the inverse sine of the angle, this side just turns into the angle, or the measure of that angle, okay? And so to type this in the calculator, the inverse sine of 51 over 55, I have to turn it into 51 divided by 55. Enter. Okay, so that is the ratio of 51 over 55. And now I'm just going to hit second sine. Awesome. And round that to the nearest degree. So 68.0 would round to 68 degrees. There we go. Beautiful. Okay, let's do another one. The measure of an angle is equal to, let's see, 34 over 55. So once again, I have this opposite. So I'm going to pick sine again. So sine of an angle is opposite hypotenuse. So sine of an angle is 34 over 55. And so the measure of angle A would be the inverse sine of 34 over 55. 34. Okay, so 34 divided by 55 is about 0.62. And so I'm going to hit second sine and round to the nearest degree. So the measure of angle A is 38 degrees. Cool. Next one. Ooh, this one's a little different. There's nothing here on the hypotenuse. So because there's nothing on the hypotenuse, I can't pick sine or cosine, so I'm probably going to pick tangent. So 29's opposite and adjacent is 38. So let's set up the equation. The tangent of an angle is opposite over adjacent. So the tangent of angle A is 29 over 38. So we know the measure of angle A would have to be the inverse tangent. Oops, I almost wrote sine, but now my trig function is tangent. So the inverse tangent of 29 over 38. Okay, so 29 over 38, enter inverse tangent. There it is, round to the nearest degree. So the measure of angle A is 37 degrees. Let's keep it going. Okay, now this one is set up the same way. I have opposite over adjacent. So I'm going to pick the tangent function. So tangent of an angle is opposite over adjacent. So that's 34 over 42. So the measure of angle A would be the inverse tangent of 34 over 42. Okay, 34 over 32, inverse tangent. Awesome, and we're going to round to the nearest degree. So the measure of angle A would be 47 degrees. Very cool. Okay. Now we're going to just continue that down the aisle here. Opposite, and that's our hypotenuse. So we need the sine function. So sine of an angle is 19 over 27. So the measure of angle A would be the inverse sine of 19 over 27. Rounded to the nearest degree. All right, this one also looks like sine. Opposite hypotenuse. So the sine of an angle is opposite hypotenuse. So the sine of angle A is 14 over 24. So the measure of angle A would be the inverse sine of 14 over 24. 14 over 24 is this decimal, and then just put inverse sine. So that is rounded to the nearest degree, 36 degrees. Oh, my lights. Sorry about that. There we go. Not enough movement in my classroom. Now we have the measure of an angle. This is the opposite. This is actually adjacent. So I need that tangent because tangent has opposite and adjacent. So the tangent of an angle is opposite over adjacent. So the measure of angle A would be the inverse tangent, 8 over 20. And then I need to round to the nearest degree. So 8 divided by 20 is 0.4, and inverse tangent would round up to 22 degrees. Okay, one more, and then we'll do the ones at the top. So, oh, this one's different. I have nothing here for the opposite. I do have adjacent and hypotenuse. So I haven't used that one yet on this homework. Looks like I need to use cosine. So the cosine of an angle is adjacent over the hypotenuse. Okay, so the measure of angle A would be the inverse cosine of 52 over 56, and we should be able to round that to the nearest degree. Okay, so 52 over 56, enter, and then I just have to make sure I hit inverse cosine, and that would round to 22 degrees. Very cool. Now what's happening up top? Well, interestingly enough, it's pretty much the same thing. So if we kind of compare question 6 to question 8, I could have written this 19 divided by 27. If I look at this question right here, question number 8, I could have kept or forced you to write this middle step. 19 divided by 27 is 0.7037, okay? But I didn't make you write out that step because we just kept it in our calculator. Sorry about that noise. Okay, so now in the same way, all of these, I can take the inverse tangent of both sides. So if I took the inverse tangent of the left and the inverse, now it's hard to fit it in here, but the inverse tangent to the right. So the inverse tangent of A, the left side of the equation would just leave me with A. This side of the equation would be the tangent, inverse tangent of 2.0503. And that's going to give you the measure of angle A. Same thing here. If I took the inverse tangent of both sides, I'd get the measure of angle Y would be the inverse tangent of 0.6494. Here, the inverse cosine would give you the measure of angle V, which would be the inverse cosine. Okay. Here, taking the inverse cosine to both sides, I would get the measure of angle Z, which would be the inverse cosine of this ratio or decimal. Keep going. This would be the inverse sine of this ratio. last one, the measure of angle C would be the inverse sine. Okay. Now, how do we put this in the calculator? That's the real thing. It's the same. So before, we actually had to create a decimal. So again, one that we already did, 51 over 55. See how we created a decimal. They're actually skipping that step, and they're telling you what the decimal is. So this decimal is, we do have to enter the decimal first, 2.0503. Second tangent gives us the end, and it says round to the nearest degree. So that would round up to 64 degrees. Okay, next one, 0.6494. Oh, typed it in wrong, 0.6494. And then I hit the inverse tangent. That'll round to 33 degrees. Type in the decimal, 0.6820, and I want the inverse cosine, 47 degrees. Type in the decimal. Would round to 83 degrees. 0.8746. 0.8746 inverse sine. That would round to 61 degrees. And 0.2756 inverse sine rounds to 16 degrees.